For our intervention proposal, Sara Greene and Megan Perkins are presenting on women and men at Wesleyan University. First, we're going to start with the history of the conflict. Let's start with a brief history of Wesleyan. Wesleyan was founded in 1831 as a Methodist institution. Wesleyan was considered to be a pioneer institution for admitting women briefly from 1872 to 1912 to study alongside men. Women were admitted once again in 1968 as transfer or exchange students. The first female freshman class was admitted in the fall of 1970. This was only 52 years ago. Since admitting women, there has been a huge gender imbalance. There was and still is conflict between men and women on campus. Here are some testimonials from students at Wesleyan in the 1960s and 1970s. These testimonials are sourced from the 1970 reunion class book from 2020, the class's 50-year reunion. A testimonial from a female student reads, "I was usually the only woman in a class, self-conscious and afraid to speak. I didn't feel free. Overall, the experience was emotionally chaotic for me." A testimonial from a male student reads, "It was a male community in which women were guests, honored sometimes, ignored sometimes, objectified all too often." It is easy to notice the difference in tone between the two students. The male student definitely felt like he was in the dominant group, and the female student felt like she was in the out group. So, what's the issue here? First, women at Wes have felt objectified for years. The culture of toxic masculinity was ingrained on campus when women first arrived in the late 60s and has persisted ever since. This rift is felt in the social scene at parties, in hookup culture on campus, and even in the Freeman Athletic Center. Despite stereotypes and jokes about groups on campus, their behaviors continue because their actions are seen as normal. This issue is intractable, yet constantly overlooked and somewhat normalized between peers. Next, we will move to the psychological interpretation of the issue.
Some key psychological research that serves as good background into this issue of sexism comes from the Power and Sexism reading. So this reading looks at how sexism has persisted over time, specifically examining the power imbalances between men and women in society. So even if these imbalances sometimes manifest in ways that seem unproblematic, this still reinforces hierarchies of power and keeps the current conflict in place because people are maintaining their set views and stereotypes as it pertains to gender. So a specific example of this that the reading focuses on is the idea of benevolent sexism. And this concept is based in stereotypes that position women as childlike and incompetent. And it also utilizes soft influence tactics that manipulate the situation and also maintain very specific views of men and women. This idea also, and a lot of this reading also draws along the ideas of masculinity and how masculinity is a cherished social identity that is also easily threatened, and also the ways that masculinity is thought of as a symbol of power and dominance and status, and it's positioned in society as very strictly anti-feminine. And this concept specifically comes into play in this idea of benevolent sexism, but also the way that women who succeed are sometimes thought of as a threat to masculinity by men. So successful women are often exploited and also particularly vulnerable to gender-based discrimination, which creates a furthering harmful cycle of persisting sexism. Even just the existence or the presence of a competent and successful woman sometimes threatens masculinity for men, and it may result in sexual harassment. So these concepts are highly relevant to Wesleyan's campus and the dynamics of male and female relations, because these interactions are happening every day in peer relationships, professor-student relationships, etc. There's many ways that these ideas can be playing out, and specifically to Wesleyan and to any college campus, the amount of time that people are spending together, living together for 4 years, especially at a small school like Wesleyan, only exacerbates these issues.
The next article is Herrick's paper on confronting sexual stigma. While this paper focuses on heterosexuality compared to homosexuality, they employ an interesting framework that can be applied to our male versus female conflict. The three major types of stigma described in this paper are enacted stigma, felt stigma, and internalized stigma. Enacted stigma is seen in aggressive behavior towards others. Felt stigma is also seen in behavior, and internalized stigma is seen in oneself. These stigmas are perpetuated through societal institutions and systems, putting the outgroup at a disadvantage. This broad idea can be applied to Wesleyan, where women are the marginalized group in this example. Lastly, we will move to the intervention itself. Our proposed Here is a sample. Our proposed intervention is an app called Find Me Wes. It would be designed to feature students' real-life experiences with gender and sexism-related problems. We would source material from our peers through anonymous survey, seeking inspiration from popular campus Instagram accounts like Wesleyan Survivors and FGLI at Wes. What sets us apart from Instagram accounts or other immersion-style apps is our Wesleyan exclusive humor. We are employing this method to retain users and lighten the mood when dealing with heavier topics. Here is a sample of a map that our map would show. If you look closely, there are numbers on each of the points on the map, signifying stops that our character may take. For example, she would start out at Exley Science Center, point 1, but would have to walk to her house on Pearl Street for stop 2. This is a long commute, especially at night. We mentioned that we would be using humor, so our character would be stopped on her way out of Exley by popular Wesleyan figure, Father Bill. They would have a brief conversation about his dog or the New York Yankees before she is on her way home. Then she may stop at Low Rise, point 3, before continuing her commute because of the aggressors on her way home, like a potential cat collar or speeding car. Our character may also opt to take the Wesleyan Ride, a service on campus, but the ride may take a long time to get to her, so her commute home may take even longer.
We are specifically aiming for our intervention only to be used by the Wesleyan community so that we can create positive change more effectively in the smaller scale. We also think that utilizing campus experiences, drawing on campus dynamics will be a lot more effective in engaging empathy because these are peers. These are experiences that happen to somebody that was in your class or that you've seen at USTAN. So we think that this will make the intervention a lot more effective on this scale. It'll also provide a unique opportunity to use a lot of different experiences that only this campus would relate to. And also it would open up a dialogue within the community that is open to all members. So something that you see on the app, you can end up talking to your peers about. And we think that this would be a really effective way at combating this issue on Wesleyan's campus specifically. Now, how to implement this app, how to make people use it. I think that promoting this app on apps that students already use, such as Yik Yak or Instagram, has been successfully done before. Actually, an app gained popularity this semester because of somebody doing that. And we also think that utilizing campus resources would be an effective strategy in implementing this. So all campus emails and utilizing all of the campus's networks and putting up flyers, all are really important ways to spreading the word about this app and making people use it. Lastly, in terms of long-term outcomes, we hope that through this app, males on this campus will be more aware of sexism in their daily life, both as males, how they're potentially contributing to the issue, but also being more aware of how their peers are being affected by this issue. And overall, this increased awareness will hopefully empower individuals to stand up for their female peers and really advocate for stronger change in this area, being more aware of their own sexism and how to prevent that, and also being able to talk to their male friends about this issue and how to make sure that they're not participating. In terms of how we're going to evaluate this, there will be a feature in the app where students can share their feedback on how this can be done better, how effective it's being, how there could potentially be changes to make it more effective, but also we think what's most important in terms of long-term effectiveness is to include a few questions in the end of university survey that all students take at the end of their Wesleyan experience, just to provide an opportunity for some self-reflection on how this app has changed their experience or not, and just to kind of take a moment to look at the more long-term effects over one's entire Wesleyan experience. Reflecting on the strengths and weaknesses of our proposed intervention, it's important to consider the psychological research that suggests that this type of app will be effective. So the re-app article details that a main concern with participating in conflict-related interventions is a lack of motivation from participants because it's difficult to rethink their existing attitudes. But this app suggests that mobile games are a fun, easy, and accessible way to do this. And we also think that this type of app will be important in dealing with this lack of motivation issue that arises. So we hope that this app that we've created will do the same thing, and that it'll overcome these issues of people not being willing to engage in dialogue or other types of interventions, such as the many workshops and seminars that the school already provides. And by using this mobile app, it'll allow more people to become involved in the intervention, even if it's not their main motivation to look at sexism at Wesleyan. Maybe it's just to look at the funny jokes or any of the other things involved in this app, but it's still an important way to overcome this lack of motivation by Wesleyan students. So this goes along with some of the other strengths of this app is that it's more likely to be utilized without resentment from students. They don't want to be lectured at again and again over the same issues, but hopefully this will subconsciously expose them to the issue, and then they'll be more aware of it, even if that's not their motivation to take something from it. Also, utilizing humor as a tool to still create social commentary, but without feeling like a burden, is another strength of this app that gets at the issue of motivation. Some of the weaknesses, while humor could be a positive, it is important to note that this could also make this app more vulnerable to being misinterpreted, misused, and even just made fun of and not taken as seriously as it should. There also could be issues of confidentiality. So in order to combat this, we would need to be very selective with what stories make it to the app. They need to be vague enough that it's not used to identify and cancel people. Certainly no names being used, but still there needs to be concern for students' well-being and privacy. Also, there is an interesting point that because everything is an app nowadays, people may be so desensitized to these apps because they use so many that it might not be as effective as we want it to be. Or there is also a risk that it might just be a passing trend where people really use it for 1 week, but then it blows over. We really hope that's not the case, but it is a risk with this type of intervention.
Thank you.